My responsibility is to introduce Shawn, and that is a treat. I've had a chance to do that several times because he has spoken for us on numerous occasions. Shawn Boyer is the founder and CEO of, and you're probably thinking Snag a Job, but it's not, it's Go Happy. Go Happy. It's a social platform for groups that provides them with a private place to interactively share, save, and collaborate on things that are important to them, the groups, with a mission to help people build better relationships. Go Happy loves that families, friend groups, small groups, sports teams, and everything in between are using the platform to fuel those relationships. Now, prior to Go Happy, Shawn founded and was CEO of Snag a Job, which was the nation's largest marketplace for hourly workers and employers. As a matter of fact, in 2008, he was named the National Small Business Person of the Year by the U.S. Small Business Administration for Snag a Job. Shawn is a frequent speaker regarding building workplace cultures and on living an intentional life and the importance of relationships, work-life balance. He's appeared in many places such as Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Good Morning America. He's a graduate of the College of William & Mary and the Washington and Lee School of Law, and he has served or continues to sit on numerous different nonprofit boards, including currently Needle's Eye. He is an avid reader, an outdoor enthusiast, a former college quarterback, and he loves to spend time with his wife, Tennille, and his 3 children. Help me welcome our speaker today, Shawn Boyer.
Well, thank you, buddy, and it's fantastic to be here with you all. Thanks to the whole Needle's Eye team. Thank you all for taking a break from work. And see the people over there that are sitting close to the door that you guys can sneak out in case this whole work-life balance talk, squishy stuff takes too long. You can duck out real quick. I'll be very mindful of that. I already told my wife that I've got to stay late tonight since I'm taking about an hour and a half to do this today. Oh, that's a joke. But it does remind me, this is kind of funny. And this attorney friend of mine does not work at Sands Anderson, where I'm sure you guys have great work-life balance, but he said he kind of ratted himself out, and he said, I got home from work late one night, just kind of fell into bed, exhausted. His wife was kind of half asleep, and he was just like, honey, he was like, I just can't continue this same work schedule. It's just killing me. I feel like I'm missing Mark's whole 5th grade year. And he said his wife kind of turned over, looked at him, and she said, honey, Mark's in 6th grade. So anyway, none of us want that to happen to us, right? And so it is, though, a seriously important topic, right? I mean, work-life balance, it's a funny thing for us to come in and kind of joke about and stuff. But if any of y'all have read The 5 Regrets of the Dying, have y'all heard of that book? Hospice nurse wrote it, Bronnie Ware. It's worth going in and at least reading kind of the initial excerpt if you don't read the whole book. But if you do start with this end in mind, which I'm a big fan of, regardless of whether it's in business or it's in your personal life or whatever it is, then I think it's helpful to read about what have these people said who are on their deathbeds or who for the last 3-6 months of their life are relating on to this woman who's taking these notes. And the top 2 regrets of the dying are, 1, and they both relate to work-life balance. 1, I have not lived a life that is true to myself. I just kind of conformed to what other people thought that I should be doing. I wasn't doing the stuff that I was really passionate about. And the other thing is that I work too much, right? So, I mean, when you think about that, it's like, man, I don't want to be on my deathbed having those same 2 regrets. And so if we took and we even broke down the whole phrase work-life balance, which I mean, again, I get why we talk about it as work-life balance because everybody kind of immediately knows what that means. But I don't like the phrase itself, partly because the word balance, it means you've got a different set of elements that are equal. Or in a correct proportion. That's the Merriam-Webster definition of it, right? And so I think it's very elusive for us to think about there being some perfect balance, that we arrive at that place and forevermore now we're going to be in balance in our work life, right? It just doesn't happen that way. I mean, you have kids and all of a sudden you've got this other thing, put into your life. You're in the middle of a trial and, all of a sudden, you're working lots of hours. You all of a sudden have to get ready for a big deal, and that injects itself into your life. You get a promotion and you've got to start traveling once every 2 weeks across the country. That injects itself into your life. And so it's this constant balancing act, not a balance that you achieve and it's perfect for the rest of your life. The other part is that just by saying work-life, it puts those two, one, at odds with each other, like, they're enemies or something. The other part of it is that there's work, and then there's life, and all the other things in life that you're passionate about are kind of equal status to work, right? When in essence, it's just life, right? And work is an important part of life, a really cool part of life, can be an energy fueling part of life, but it's not work and then every other thing in my life, such as my friendships, my family, my health, my hobbies, all of the other stuff, and they're the same, and I'm trying to balance them against each other. And so I love the word or the phrase life balancing, right? Where it's that paradigm of, okay, it's life, and I'm balancing work inside of it, I'm balancing my friendships inside of it, and how am I being a good friend to the neighbor down the street, to my college buddy who I haven't seen in a while. How am I being a good spouse? How am I being a good dad or a mom? How am I balancing my health and making sure I'm getting the right exercise and all those other things, right? So it's thinking about life and it being this constant balancing effort. And so for me, this is something that's become a huge passion for me. Much in the same way for Gina, and again, I haven't heard her whole story, but for me, why this has become a passion is that if I rewound the clock 15 years ago to when I was just into starting Snag a Job, about 4 years into it or so, and I had just gotten to the point in my life where all I did was work. And all of my other areas of life that I really cared about had just taken a back seat. Not even a back seat, they were like in the trunk, packed away. And two examples of that, both on the relationship side that I had totally ignored. One was my best friend from growing up. His mom was like a second mom to me. She passed away, and I said I was too busy to go to her funeral, which I know sounds awful when you hear that. You're like, dude, what a jerk. And I mean, in reality, I was an awful friend. The guy who I traveled, he was a college buddy of mine. I traveled to Europe with him and another guy for 6 weeks after we graduated from college. We were tight. I never returned any of his phone calls. Once I started Snag a Job, I was just so heads down, never returned his calls, never went out with him or anything. He got married, he never invited me to his wedding. I was like, dude, you didn't even invite me to your wedding. He was like, you never returned my calls. And so, I mean, those were like two illustrative pieces of evidence as to just how out of whack my life had gotten. I got to this point, though, where I was just like, man, I got to do something. It's totally out of whack. My faith, again, and all these relationships taking a back seat. And so I determined that in 2005, my theme for that year was going to be balance. And I had been really diligent about setting goals for work, but had done, again, this awful job of setting goals in all these different areas of my life. So I was like, okay, I'm going to set goals in my personal life this year. So I wrote all my goals for Snag a Job down, and they were multiple different pages, and then I wrote my personal goals down. And as I looked at it afterwards, I was like, isn't that ironic that this is year of balance, and I've got multiple pages of goals for Snag a Job, and I've got about this much for all the other different areas of my life. And so I just started to read as much as I could on living what for me would be this, great life, one that was intentional in all the different areas of my life. And one of the things that I was really convicted of was that, okay, at work, we were very passionate about having a mission statement. At Snag a Job, it was to put people in the right fit positions so that they could maximize their potential to live more fulfilling lives. And I think it was one of the most impactful things that we did there. And I realized I don't have a life mission statement. Similarly, we were great about then taking and cascading those things down into objectives, where it was, okay, here's what we're going to get done for this year, here's what we then need to get done for this quarter, for this month, for this week. I didn't have that in the other areas of my life. And at work also, the team and developing a cohesive team, a team that had this diversity to it that could really propel us forward was so critically important. We invested a lot in that. We invested a lot in our culture. And as I looked at the people who were around me to help go live this life out that I wanted to go live, it was non-existent. I just didn't put any intention behind it. I didn't put any energy behind it. And so as I reflect on it, I was like, you know what? If I approached my life, all these other areas of my life, with the same degree of intentionality that I did with work, my life would look a heck of a lot different. So in the same way that, do any of y'all, have you read Jim Collins before, Good to Great and Built to Last? And by reading that, and probably not even by just reading that great organizations inevitably have a mission statement that is critically important to that organization, right? It's kind of the North Star that guides them, and it's the why, right? It's like, okay, why are we here as an organization when I'm in the drudgery of a pivot table in Excel or the drudgery of doing discovery for the trial that's coming up? It's like, okay, I'm doing this for the purpose of X, right? How am I making the world a better place by being at this place? And I looked at, again, my life, and I was like, shoot, I don't have a life mission statement. And it's not like there are a gazillion of these floating around, right? You can go to any company's or organization's site and go to the About Us and find their mission statement. Not a lot of us out there talking about what our life mission statements are. You can't go Google it and find out what Tom Ebel's life mission statement is. And so for me, I was like, man, I want to be able to have that. Because if we don't have that, in my opinion, it's just so easy to get caught up in whatever the world thinks is important as an individual in life, right? And when you look at the people who get written about all the time, and kind of the people that are the idols or the people that you might aspire to be, it's people who've had a ton of success within their work, right? I mean, you think about it. I mean, it's politicians, it's the Steve Jobs of the world, it's the Warren Buffetts of the world, it's, whatever, Gwyneth Paltrow, it's Carly Fiona. I mean, it's these different people who have achieved a ton of positional success and material success, but you don't really read about or have and held in high esteem people who, if you looked at it, say, you know what, they've had a lot of success from God's perspective. Or even if you're not a Christian, it's people who have had a lot of success in being a great mom, in being a great friend to all of her friends, in terms of living this healthy life that even at 78 she can go run around and play with her grandkids. Right? I mean, those examples just aren't out there, and so it's just so easy then to just kind of conform to what it appears to be ultimate success of the Warren Buffetts of the world and the Steve Jobs of the world. And heck, when you pull back the covers on those people and you read their biographies, for the most part, those people had terrible relationships with their kids. They were terrible friends, right? But that's not what gets held up in the limelight. And so I think it's so important for us then to say, okay, for me, for my mission statement, if that's going to be my North Star, and guiding how I think about what my work-life balance needs to be, what would that be, right? If you had to be able to articulate that into one sentence. And one of the verses that I love that's just so helpful for me is Romans 12:2, where it says, do not conform to the behaviors and customs of this world, right? And it's so awesome, I think, how that was just as applicable then as it is now, right? And then, it goes on to say, but let God transform you. I love the word let, right? It's like, okay, let God transform us into a new person by changing the way we think. Changing the way you think, right? And I just think for me, in thinking about it being so easy for me to get caught up in the materialism of chasing that next thing at work, right? If I don't have this paradigm of, I want God to change the way I think. Not conforming to the behaviors of this world, the customs of this world, what everybody else in the press deems as a success that I can find myself just chasing, right? Like, dude, I want to be the next, rock star tech CEO, right? Like, I want to chase that next financial milestone or whatever it might be. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but it's just being able to take it within the context of, okay, what at the end of the day is most important to me? And so for me, my mission statement is to glorify God in every aspect of my life so that I can have as big of an impact on the kingdom as He has made me able to do. And so, again, for me, that gets into all of the different aspects of my life, whether it's hanging out with my friends and being a good friend to them and loving on them and showing them how much I care about them, to being hopefully a good dad at least some of the time, right? And not losing my cool too much of the time. And when I do, going in and apologizing to them, but all of those different aspects of life within that context of so that, you can go have the biggest impact on the kingdom as possible. So for me, the first part of trying to have this better work-life balance is, okay, why? Like, why do I even want to have this work-life balance? Why do I want to have this life balancing? And it goes back to, okay, well, what is it that I want my life to be about at the end of the day? What's most important to me? And I would urge you all, I don't know how many of you have a life mission statement. I'm not going to ask people to raise their hands or anything, but if you don't have one, try writing one down. I know for me at least, it was an iterative process, and it's hard to get it down into a sentence. But for me, again, it's so helpful because it ends up guiding a lot of other decisions. The second thing then, again, relating back to approaching work from an intentional perspective, is setting goals, right? That's kind of the equivalent of setting a one-year objective at work and cascading it down into quarterly and monthly objectives. But setting these life goals, and within that, again, it's within the context of the life mission statement, but three things that I have found to be super helpful for me. One is, think about what are the different buckets of life that I care about, right? Your faith, if that's important to you, your family, your friendships, your hobbies, like what are you passionate about, right? Like, you love gardening or whatever it might be. You love tennis, you love golf, you love the arts, whatever it is. And just even line iteming out what those buckets are. I know for me, when I went and I did that, I was like, dude, this is pretty cool. Like, I get a lot of juice out of hitting objectives at work, but when I put a trips and adventure goal out there of, I want to go do a trip out west or something, then when I go do that, it's amazing. And I wouldn't have gone and done it without having actually created that bucket and said that that's an important thing to me. The second thing then is write those things down. And you can think about them all you want in your head, right? But until you write them down, and there's study after study out there that points to the fact that unless you write them down, you've got like I can't remember the exact statistics off the top of my head, but it's like you've got a 5% chance of hitting them if you have them mentally and you don't write them down. You've got a 40+% chance of hitting them if you actually go and you write them down. And the third thing, and again, this gets into how we approach things at work, is put it on your calendar. Let's just take an example, right? If one of my things is I want to have a recurring lunch with my kids, and I can say I want to go, my kids are still in school, they're 11, 8, and 7. And, I can say that, what, I need to be spending more time with my kids, and, I want to surprise them sometimes at school and just show up. If I don't put that on my calendar, ain't no way in the world I'm going to do it. Maybe I'll do it once a year, right? But if I put it on my calendar and I make it a regular occurring thing, right, then I'm going to show up. And don't let other stuff start to intrude into that space that I've already blocked off on my calendar to be able to go do those things. Whether it's the girls' night out, right, that, those relationships are really important, or that recurring lunch or dinner or whatever it might be with one of your best friends, but everybody's busy in life and so you hardly ever see her anymore. But getting those things down onto the calendar, I think, is so critically important. The third thing then is the team, right? And again, in a work setting, we all know that if you're going to go anywhere as an organization, it's all about the team. And it's who you surround yourself with, and then how much you invest into those relationships to ensure that you're working together as well as you can as a team. And I think the same thing is true, and again, I know it was for me, in terms of when I looked at who I had surrounded myself with to be a mentor to me and to help me get to where I was going, I didn't have anybody. I mean, they were around, but I didn't go intentionally seek them out. I didn't intentionally ask them to go to lunch and to go grab coffee and to pick their brains and have me be able to learn from them, right? Because, there are three ways we learn. We either read it someplace, somebody else shares it with us directly, or we screw it up ourselves and figure out that, I don't want to do that again, right? And so the third thing for me was just seeking out these mentors. And I've got, a couple of them now that are so incredibly helpful. And the key there, and I know we've got a handful of younger people in here, is the key, I think, is not finding a mentor that has been ultra successful at just their profession, but looking at those people as, okay, are those people somebody whose lives I want to emulate? Do I want my life to look like those? Because I'll have young people meet with me all the time, and they'll talk about this mentor who's the partner at the law firm, they're the top billing partner and stuff, and attorneys are always easy to pick on the work-life balance thing, right? Just, dude, when you're in billable hours world, it's hard. But they want to go emulate that person and their mentor, and that person's advocating that they go bill 70 hours, a week. And it's like, all right, but look at that. That person has a cruddy relationship with their spouse if they have a spouse anymore, and they don't know their kids. And you know what? They were retired for about a year at 65, and then they had no other passions. They had nothing else to go do, so they came back to work all the time. And so it's just, and that may be fine, totally fine for that person, but it's at least thinking about, okay, do I want my life to look like that person's? So there's a quick last story, and I know we got to wrap up, but it's to that point. And I was at this university here in Virginia, and I went to this entrepreneur in residence. They bring in somebody to talk about how they've built their companies to be at whatever successful level they are. And it was this guy who had built this mega, I guess it was $1 billion plus company at the time. And the talk I went to was for the MBA students. And one of the questions to him was, okay, if you could point to just one thing that has led to your success, what would you say it is? And the guy said, that's easy. He was like, hard work. He's like, I was always the first person there. I was there no later than 7 o'clock every single morning. I never left before 7. I worked every Saturday. And that's just what it took. And that's what has helped to build this, this empire, basically. And so one of the other folks in the audience who had, quite the spine raised his hand, and he said, so it sounds like to me that you intentionally, put that much effort into work, but maybe to the sacrifice of your family and your friends. And I mean, he said it in a nice enough way, but the guy got ticked. I mean, immediately just flipped a switch, reacted. He's like, how dare you question me and how I've prioritized my life. And he started talking about the fact that he had no relationship with his daughter, his son had been in and out of jail, and he had no relationship with him and stuff. But anyway, it was just interesting to me that, sad, one, right? But two is, okay, if that's the life that guy wanted, this entrepreneur, then, and he just thought about it intentionally and said, you know what? I want to build this empire, and it is going to be at the expense of my family and my friendships and so forth, and knowing that, okay, if I spend that much time at work, it just is going to be at the detriment of that. Like, I just can't do both that well. Then awesome, he achieved in his life success. But if that's not what he would have wanted to have had, then he failed, right? And did he even sit down and have that same conversation with his spouse at the time, say, look, honey, you know what, this is going to take me working this amount of hours in order for us to be able to build this, $1 billion plus company. You cool with that? And having an actual conversation about it. And it's not meant to say that, look, we can't work hard, right? I mean, well, about, you gotta bust it in order to be able to do stuff, but it's within certain parameters. And so that's the other thing I would say there is just setting the parameters for yourself in terms of, okay, what are my work parameters? And being able to set them. Not that you're not going to have times where you got to flex up and down based on what's happening in life. I've got the trial, I've got the big presentation, I've got to, do whatever it is. But setting at least some form of parameters. So 3 quick asks. Always love to have asks. Because the hypothesis of all of this is that, okay, if I think about things more from how do I want my life to look? How does God want my life to look, right? And just constantly being in prayer about God, how do you want my life to look? That you have a better chance then of living this life that you love, and that one is that is serving God well, again, if you're a Christian, and that's an important part to you. And so the three asks, 3 takeaways would be, 1, if you don't have a life mission statement, take a crack at it. The second thing is, if you were to watch a video of the first 2 months of this year, and you sit down with a friend to do that, what would that look like in terms of what things you were focused on, what things you prioritized, and would it be in alignment with whatever you just crafted as a mission statement? And one of the best ways to kind of replay the video is to go do an audit of your calendar from the last 60 days, right? And look at it and put it into a pie chart. You're not going to have probably all the time that, you're hanging out with your family and your friends and all that kind of thing on your Microsoft Outlook calendar, but you can at least say, okay, I know about what I was doing there. Put sleep into it, right? We all get 168 hours each week, but look at the pie chart of how that breaks down. You don't have to do this all the time, right? It's just kind of a one time or you check in every so often. How did that look? And then the third thing that I would say is, what are those buckets that are really important to you? And don't, go try to, shoot the moon. Go put one thing you want to go do and a couple of those. Just a couple, just to start off with. Because you can kind of I know for me at least, I can overwhelm myself putting all this stuff down and then like, oh man, I feel more stressed at the end of this than I did at the beginning of it, right? And that defeats the purpose. We don't want to do that. But put one or two things down that you want to go do and then get that sucker on your calendar or get those couple things on the calendar. And so I think, at least for me, when I do that, and it's a regular struggle, it's the constant life balancing act, but I think when I approach it in that way, I think it gives us such a much better chance of living this life that God wants us to live, this life balancing piece that is, again, much more in alignment with what I think He wants. And again, even if you're not a Christian, much more in alignment with what you want, right? Because if we're not planning it, somebody else is planning it for us, right? Because we're just reacting versus, being proactive and planning for it. So.
We don't have quite the amount of time we normally do for questions, but we have time for a couple, and I can't not have him have an opportunity to answer some of your questions. So please be succinct. All we need is one to get us going. Who's got one?
I got one.
Tony.
I'm curious of how, when you decide to give more balance to your life, I'm sure as the creator of Snag-a-Job that there's so many demands on your time, and you invested in that. So how do you make that break and say, I'm going to stop doing this for now because I need to spend time with my family? Do you pass it off to somebody else? Do you just let it? I'm sure that's been a dilemma, and I'd like to hear your answer to that.
Yeah, I think it's a combo of both of those things. Some of those things just letting go of, some of those things delegating. And I think one of the things that I've learned, and I'm continuing to learn, is that these things that I think I have to do, I really don't have to do. And I think one of the most important elements of this whole living more intentionally and having better life balance is saying no to stuff. Because I'm tempted to say yes to a lot of stuff, whether it's more stuff at work, whether it's, going to have lunch with the next person who emailed in saying, hey, can I pick your brain about X or Y? And so I think one of the most important things is saying no to what is it that I'm not going to do. Some of those things just don't get done. Some of them, though, are delegated to somebody else that can, in a lot of cases, at least for me, be done a lot better than what I can do them. And I've become a big fan. If you haven't read the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, I would strongly advocate for that. And what he talks about in that is the power, the richness in saying, okay, if I could only do but one thing such that it would render all of these other things either less important or unnecessary, what would that one thing be? And blocking off enough time to focus on that one thing. And you could do that at work, obviously, but it'd also be applicable in some of the other areas of life.
That was in City Slickers too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One thing.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what it is.
Doug.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if the sliding boards at Snag-a-Job were that one thing.
I'm sorry.
We have
I'm
swings.
sorry. I should not have called on him.
Yeah, actually, I've got a serious question. No, as you put together your mission statement, your life mission statement, and as you looked at your goals, and as you evaluate it on a regular basis, did you involve Tennille in that process early, or did you did you involve the family, the kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Tennille and I were not married when I initially put that together. We got married after that. But it's something now that she and I will sit down and do annually. And she would have so scoffed at this 10 years ago. She probably still makes fun of me behind my back about it. Or she'd actually make fun of me to my face. But we'll sit down and we'll talk about those things that we want to get done or we want to do together as a family over the next 15 years. Just those are very general, right? It's like, one of those things where we want to be able to go do X or we want to be able to give Y. And then we get much more concrete around the things that we want to do over the next year. So, and we block off a day to be able to do that together because it is so important. It's like when you start to list the things down that you want to do, if you're married, I mean, they pretty much all involve the other person, or a good chunk of them do at least. And so I do think it's a really healthy exercise to do it. But again, I think it's one of those, even though it sounds like it really, we're going to sit down, we're going to do goals as a couple, but it's a fun thing, because most of the stuff you're putting on there is stuff that you're really passionate about and want to be able to go do. I mean, how cool is to sit down and talk about, all right, what vacations do we want to take this year, right? What are the cool, fun, spontaneous things that we want to be able to go do with the kids? What are the things that we want to go do together as a couple? What are the things we want to learn? So I think it's one of those things that if you don't block off the time, it just doesn't happen.
So you involve the kids in it too, to some degree? Or?
We involve the kids in it to some degree, but not like the full day planning. Again, they would get bored in a nanosecond. But we do involve them. Hey guys, here's what we're thinking. What would you guys like to do? And definitely, like, one of the things for me, and sorry, I may be running over, is like a thing that's become really important to me is having one-on-one time with my kids. And I just see that they open up so much more, and then that carries over into our relationship even after we're back from our little one-on-one thing. But I definitely involve them then and let them dictate, what do you want to go do, within reason.
One last short question. Succinct and short. Yes.
And actually, thank you, because I'm very excited. My mission is to impact and improve families' lives, starting with my own first. Glad you asked the question, because now I know Tennille's name. Do you guys do a workshop, as a couples workshop, to deliver to the marketplace?
No, we don't. We've actually never even gone to one. We've talked about going to one ourselves, but we haven't. We haven't done either. I think we need to do more of we need to go to one together.
Just thought.
Great job. Thank you.